No, gotcha. We're gonna get in here and have a good organic conversation.
Good.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Okay. No, thanks for having me and look forward to the official conversation.
Yeah, let's get in here. So let's begin with this. I always start with the COVID question because I think it's something that we haven't talked about enough. How did you get through that era? 6 years ago, this thing was changing our lives.
Right.
How did you get through it, and how has it changed the way that you approach things today?
Well, so it's a really interesting question because when COVID hit and the information came out, I actually got really angry. And the anger was at the way the officials were treating this as if they knew the answers. So, for example, I actually flew out to California right before everything shut down, and I was hearing the CDC and the government um, saying, masks do no good at all. And I'm thinking, all over Asia, they wear masks all the time. And so I don't believe that masks do no good at all. And for them to be and for you to be saying this, there's something behind this. And then 2 weeks later, it was like masks will do everything for you, and you should be wearing a mask. And it's like, aha, I knew that there was a reason. I still don't know the reason why at the time. I didn't know the reason why they were doing this, but it's like you guys, you're saying these things as if this is science, and it's not. And then the other thing was I live in the New York City area, and so we were one of the first areas that was really badly hit by COVID, and you couldn't get tested. Nobody could get tested
Right.
unless you were in the hospital and dying. And so they were publishing the statistics that, like, if you have COVID, you have a 40% chance of dying. And I'm like, no, that's completely wrong because they're only testing the people who are at risk of dying. They're not testing people who have COVID. They have no idea. And for them to be putting out the information like this as if this was science was absolutely wrong. So I went into that whole year with a tremendous amount of skepticism. So so when they said, you're supposed to stay at home, you're supposed to wear a mask all the time, I'm like, no, there's some reason why they're saying this, but I'm going to continue going for walks. And I would go, we have this trail right where I live. It's actually a 23-mile trail going through the suburbs, but it's woods. And I would go and people would yell at me because I was within 10 feet of them and I wasn't wearing a mask. And I'm like, we're outside in the woods. Nobody's, we're
Yeah.
10 feet away from each other. There's no way you're going to catch COVID from me or I'm going to catch COVID from you outside. And so I got through, myself and my family. We were somewhat careful. I got vaccinated when we were told to get vaccinated. Um, I wore masks when I was around other people. I wore the right type of mask, surgical masks or whatever the number of the mask was that you're supposed to wear. I wore those masks when those masks became available. But personally, I didn't. I still saw family. My mother-in-law was going through the process of dying. We still went and visited her, even though we weren't supposed to. But it's like, no, like life goes on. So for me personally, I got really angry with the way our authorities were presenting information that was obviously wrong and really lashing out at people who pointed it out. Um, but I personally didn't have any really negative experiences with COVID.
So before we get into mind shifting and peel back the layers, I want to get into kind of an overview of what you do on a daily basis. And I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of kids. They're 13 years old. You're at career day, and they just want to know what you do for a living. How do you answer them?
I teach people how to use their brains. And then I would ask them in school, how much of the material that you're learning do you think that you're going to be using outside of school and the rest of your lives? And I'm going to get an answer from them because I'm actually around 12, 13-year-old kids a lot. And I'll get an answer from them, and they all say the same thing. Well, this school's a waste of time. We don't really learn anything interesting.
Mhm.
We'll never use this type of math. We'll never use this type of history. And then it's like, if school taught you how to really solve problems, if school taught you how to be around other people and still have fun with them, even when you disagree with them, if school taught you how to come back from failure and so you could be successful and happy about it, isn't that something that you would want to learn? And when I talk to kids about that, it's like, yes, that's what we should be, that's what we want to learn in school. And it's like, well, that's what I do.
And that's the way it should be. I remember the most seminal course I took in college was college reading and study skills. And it taught you how to approach your workload,
Yeah.
how to mentally get in there. And I think those things are huge for kids. So when you were that age, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
So when I was that age, I wanted to be a medical researcher. And I don't, and you're going to probably ask me, well, why a medical researcher? And it was just like, I don't really know. It just, I loved science. I loved going off in my own direction. I loved testing things and seeing what I could find out. And it just seemed to me that that was a great place where I could make a difference to people and use my skills. And the interesting thing is at the same time when I was in school, we took something called the Cooter Press, I think it was the Cooter preference test to see what we should go into. And it came back and said I should be an English teacher.
Wow.
And it's like, no, I'm not going to be an English teacher. I like doing this. And then, what I ended up doing is kind of marrying my love of learning and science with writing because, I'm writing about science, right?
But for me, I don't think why. That to me is not the mystery. What I would like to know is the empirical data early on in your life. What did you see with your parents and instrumental figures around you that led you to want to dig into that world, to become that? What was it about the building blocks that were made that made you who you are?
So I was, so my dad was an entrepreneur. Both my grandparents were entrepreneurs. And so I grew up with this drive to do something on my own. My mom was a tremendous support person. And so she supported, I'm one of four. She supported all of us, whatever we wanted to do, as long as we worked hard at it, as long as we didn't hurt other people, as long as we were making a difference to other people, that was what really counted. And so I think the combination of those two, plus the fact that I'm left-handed, and so everything in this, everything that we approach is geared for right-handed people. So you learn how to think in a different way because you're always like, oh, wait a minute, I can't, I reach for something with my left hand, but it's designed to be used by the right hand. So you're always making those changes. You take a a tennis lesson from somebody and you're interpreting what they're telling you to do. They say, well, throw the ball up with your left hand. And it's like, well, no, I'm throwing it up with my right hand. Throw it up in the 11 o'clock position. Oh, no, so I got to throw it up in the 1 o'clock position. So you're always reinterpreting what people say. So I think a combination of having to reinterpret what people say, this drive to go out on your own and do something, and the drive from my mom to do something that helps other people and supporting other people. I think those were the things that really influenced me.
So, who's been that ultimate influential person in your life, that heroic force that's allowed you to navigate from the beginning of your career to right now and finding your place in the world?
Well, foundationally, it was my parents. I think that the person I most quote now is a guy named, well, he's passed away, but Csikszentmihalyi. Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, who's, I think was originally from the Czech Republic, and then became a professor at University of Chicago. And he did a lot of work that showed how we are when we're most engaged with something. And he coined the term flow for that. And then he did a really interesting study on the most um, the living most successful creative people and what made them be successful. And a lot of his work I've really incorporated into the mind shifting work. So that would be number one. And then number two, there's a person named sorry about the phone ring. There's a
Oh, I
person
don't hear
named,
it. Yeah.
oh, good. There's a
Yeah.
person named Shirzad Shamin who wrote a book called Positive Intelligence. And then from that book, he has trained coaches around the country. And so I had a personal coach for 2.5 years training me on performance intelligence. So I think I would say those two.
So I remember, do you remember that movie with Jim Carrey called Sunshine on the Spotless Brain where he tried to erase a bad relationship he had in the past? It was in the 90s. It was kind of
Oh,
an indie film.
I know the name and I probably saw it, but those brain cells have been erased.
Right, okay, yeah, well, that's ironic because the whole idea of the movie was that, and we've seen this in Hollywood before, where they want to like take all these bad memories away. But I find what you're doing interesting because the power our brains have to reroute and to go to other places is amazing. So
Yep.
explain to me in a Cliff Notes version how mind shifting works and how it's so effective.
Okay, so even in the Cliff Notes version, there are three different parts of it. Okay, so one part is the brain itself, and our brains operate because we have this survival mode, which evolved from the very first animals that started moving, which keeps the organism surviving. And that part of our brain has to come to a decision within like tenths of a second that something is dangerous or not, and what to do about it. And that part of the survival brain, scientists call it the limbic system. And then as mammals, we develop this prefrontal cortex, which is what allows us to do creative thinking, critical thinking, executive function, feel empathy towards other people. But that part of the brain is a lot slower. And when our survival brain, because it assesses the situation so fast, when it latches onto something, it takes control over our entire brain. And in mind shifting, as far as the brain is concerned, what you're learning how to do is you're learning how to recognize when you're being taken over by your survival, which might be fight, flight, freeze, okay? But also doing what everybody else is doing, to recognize when you're doing that, to calm ourselves down so that we can be critically thinking, creatively thinking, empathizing with other people, aligning to what we really want to do. So that's the brain part of it. The second part of it is the way we look at situations, and it's related to the survival brain, which is, we look at situations like there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and it's like binary. Okay, it's good or it's bad. We're going to make safe by banning guns, or we're going to make safe by educating people. And we say that's a solution, and we're going to do that, and that's going to solve the problem. And real problems are never solved by like one solution, and they're never solved by the first thing that we do. So the second part of it is how do you go into a situation knowing that the first thing that you're going to be doing is probably not going to fully solve the problem, and that your inclination is to start blaming yourself or other people or the situation and giving up. But you can overcome that and take that information about why it didn't work and use that to come up with the next thing that you do. And so that's the resilience part of it. And then the third part of it is that no matter what we do, we're probably doing it with other people. And a lot of those people are going to compete with us, or they're going to try to harm us, or we don't like them or something. And our natural inclinations are to outlogic them, to give them more facts, to punish them, or to reward them. And at best, those work short term, but those tend to make the situation worse. But there's 50 years worth of research on how to work with people to move forward. And so learning how to recognize when we're in that mode where we're trying to walk over another person, then again calming ourselves down and then having access to ways to work together with them in order to accomplish things that none of us could have accomplished on our own, and welcome conflict as a way to improve rather than something to try to avoid. That's the conflict and collaboration part of it. And so those are the three elements. The first is the brain, the second, how we react to situations, and then third is how we work together with other people to move forward, even when they get in our way or disagree with us.
Thank you for that. That was wonderful, wonderful overview. I've always been fascinated by figures that have had this big capacity for brain power, from Einstein, and no matter how you feel politically about Elon Musk, there's a level of him
Yep,
that has
yep.
an unbelievable acumen. So I want to, and I'm building up to my question here. There was somebody that I interviewed about in December, and he had this condition that allows him to remember every single day of his life since he was 6 years old. So like halfway through the interview, he stops and he was like, "Were you born on Friday the 13th?" And I'm like, "Whew." Like it blew me away because I kind of tangentially mentioned that I was born October 13th, 1972. And he like got the day while we were talking, but he was pointing out all these days. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there's certain people and the way their brains work that absolutely astounds me. Who is it on this planet, whether they're alive now or they've been alive, that you've been fascinating by the way that their highway of mind intersects and works?
I would love to be in a room where Siddhartha was the original Buddha, Mohammed
Yeah.
and Jesus were together,
Yeah. Wow.
and just soaking up that wisdom.
Do you think, knowing that they're these deities that have kind of kept our planet in alignment, do you think your brain would be able to like function in that realm? Would you be able to down throttle your brain that you're around those three figures all at once?
So I would never be able to do the things that any of them have done. But through doing a lot of the work that I've done, I think that I would understand most of what they were talking about. Not all of it, because they're so far beyond somebody like me, okay? But but I've done the work to understand how to get myself into a much more receptive mind, how to align, let's say, my body, my mind, my emotions, and my spirituality. And so, having done that work, um, I would I would learn a lot from them.
You know, the one thing that's tricky about the way the brain works is that someone like Einstein, that had such levels of empathy and kindness, came up with an idea that turned nuclear. You know, and I think humanity now, we're entering this realm. We're in the middle of this tornadic situation of AI that's moving so fast, that's changing so many facets. What do you think is going to be an idea or notion that's going to help us save us from ourselves?
I think that I have a lot of thoughts. I think, first of all, I think that with kids, um, we say, oh, kids should be learning this as early as possible. I strongly disagree with that. I think kids should learn how to deal with the analog world as early as possible and learn how their bodies work, how their brains work, and how to work with other kids. And, by the time they're in, fifth or sixth grade, or maybe eighth or ninth grade, we can start then introducing them to all these technologies, but let them develop themselves first. So that's one. Two, I think that when we start really understanding what makes people special, that that is not modeled by machines, and what each one of us has as strengths, that we learn an amount of, say, cynicism towards the AI that allows us to use it as a tool rather than as a crutch.
Wow, that is totally true. And I think about that when I think about being a Gen Xer and think about my lifetime of going from rotary dial phones to this warp
Hmm.
speed of AI and this bridge in between. There has been something totally gratifying about knowing that. Just like you said about the baseball stats before we got on, you had to calculate those. I remember getting the sporting news when I was a kid and having to kind of project because it was like every week, and it was like you just had to kind of have a crystal ball in front of you, and it's
Yep, yep,
amazing to think about how all those rudimentary skills are kind of getting dusted away by these more grandiose AI and technological ideas.
yep. We need to develop our human brains. We need a certain amount of friction.
Yeah.
And using AI removes that friction. And it's like, people were very concerned when the calculator came out, like we're not going to know how to add, we're not going to know how to subtract. And to a certain extent, that has been proven true. So I think with kids, they should learn how to add, subtract, multiply, divide. They should be able to do word problems, and they should be able to do, those simple problems without a calculator. But once the problems start getting complex, to be able to rely on the calculator to do them, I think is extremely helpful. But they already understand how it's working.
So, if you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and you walked into a room and there was a film projector and you clicked play and it was a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived, the choices you made, would that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
That the young person at 16 or 17 had really lacked self-confidence. And so that person would look, I think, at the life and say, wow, you know something? I can evolve into something much more powerful. And it probably is within me myself. At least that's what I would hope that the 16-year-old me would say.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back and the whole catalog of human history and see one event with your own eyes without creating a weird tear in time, or go into the future, what would you love to see with your own eyes?
Well, you brought up Einstein. And so watching Einstein come up with the theory of relativity, I think would be so cool.
Yeah. It totally would be. And along those same lines, the one thing I think that's fascinating about this very short amount of time that we have on this planet and how many lineages of family that lead up to us. Is there anybody in your lineage of family you would love to have hung out with? Whether it was the first gen, second, third, maybe a generation removed, who in your family has intrigued you that you would love to sit down and have a coffee with?
I think that there's really two people. So my mom's dad, but I was really close to my grandparents. I never met my mom's mom, and that would be interesting too. But my mom's dad died when I was 9 or 10, and we saw him at least once a month for those. But to be able to sit down with him as an adult, because he had such an interesting career. He at one point he ran a taxi company, and it turns out his partner was a mobster, and he closed the company as soon as he found out. He was a semi-pro baseball player. He started his own business. So I'd love to sit down with him as an adult and talk to him. And then my dad's grandfather was the person who came into the U.S. and he came in from Poland, what now is Poland, into London, where he was given the name Weisburgh, and then into Canada, and then worked his way down from Canada. And one of the things that he did is wherever he was, he would say he was from another part of the U.S., and that's why he had an accent. So when he was in Albany, he would say, "Oh, I'm from Tennessee." And when he was in Tennessee, he would say, "Oh, I'm from Albany. That's why I talk this way." And so, I'd love to just talk with him and find out all his experiences because born in Poland, going to London, coming into Canada, migrating down, living in Albany and then New York and then Kentucky and then Missouri and then Oklahoma. It was just like in the early 1900s and at late 1890s and early 1900s had to be really incredibly interesting.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, Mitch, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you in different realms, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a person who is really good when I'm around other people of giving them the tools so that they can do things that they never thought that they could do.
That's beautifully said. So if anybody wants to get into mind shifting, they're ready, they want to dive in, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
I think I don't know if I can say this online, but I'm going to say it. I think they're shit out of luck. They can never reach me. So, so yeah. So I have a website, mindshiftingwithmitch.com. It talks about the courses that I teach. It talks about the books that I write. And then there's a free newsletter where I write every week about some aspect of the world and how that relates to becoming more resourceful, resilient, or collaborative.
I will put all of these links in the show notes. Mitch, I love the way you roll, man. I've done this long enough Running into souls and minds like you reaffirms that humans are doing things right. We have done some things that are very valorous, and thank you so much. Thank you for taking a minute out. I appreciate
Well,
it.
Joe, thank you for having me, and really, really thought-provoking questions.
Yes, absolutely.